got a real treat for you today because we're going to discuss in depth my favorite form of physical exercises, which is the KAATSU BFR, blood flow restriction therapy, with the person who's responsible for bringing this radical innovation in healthcare into the United States from Japan about 20 years ago. So we're going to go deep to exactly how you use it and how you can use it with virtually no weights. You don't need to go to the gym. You can just do your normal activities like walking and doing the dishes and typing on your computer. And if you've been inactive or sedentary for your entire life, even, it'll work. I mean, you'll see dramatic and pretty immediate improvement just by putting these bands on and going through a process, because they activate a really profoundly powerful hormonal response just by stimulating the amount of blood flow into your muscle. So I hope you really enjoy this.
It's basically this very, very clever biohack that will allow the muscles to work, will allow the vascular tissue to become more elastic. As the person, they don't perceive the pain of heavy lifting. However, their vascular tissue and their muscle fibers are being worked out just as effectively, and they can do it for a longer period of time. Going out, putting the KAATSU bands on your legs and walking down to the beach, or walking your dog, or just walking around the neighborhood, standing, cleaning your windows of your house. All of these things can be done with the KAATSU bands on your arms or legs. You're getting the benefit of exercise. The non-athletes start KAATSU doing average everyday things. Once they see their increased strength, once they start looking in the mirror and seeing some definition in their arms, their core, their legs, they actually get motivationally excited to do more. It's really great to see this migration from a non-athlete sedentary lifestyle to a much, much more active. And that drive is coming from inside themselves. All those beta endorphins are being produced. All of those hormones and metabolites that you speak so eloquently about, those are being produced as you're doing simple things. And that is the way to get the older population to actually understand you can stop sarcopenia. You can stop it in its place, but you have to exercise. You don't have to run a 10K. You don't have to go down to Gold's Gym. Put on the KAATSU bands and live your life as you wish. And the bands will be the mechanism that your body is working out.
Welcome, everyone. Dr. Mercola helping you take control of your health. And today we're going to focus on exercise, one of my major passions in life. And my background looks a little different because I'm traveling unexpectedly and got caught up in some things. And I really did not want to miss this interview. So Steven was kind enough to arrange a schedule to allow this to happen. And who is Steven? Steven Munatones, who is a major player in the exercise industry. And most people don't know him, but he is the single person who spent so many hours on transcontinental flights from California to Japan, because he was the first American that really understood and identified KAATSU as a profoundly effective intervention in actually radical innovation in exercise therapy, and was developed by Dr. Sato in Japan. And Steven speaks fluent Japanese, and which is one of the reasons why he was able to negotiate this. But he spent many years flying back and forth from California to Japan to bring this innovation to the United States. We're so grateful to him. It's only been here for a bit. Not that, I mean, maybe a bit over 10 years. Steven could be more precise on the history, but I wanted to bring Steven on today because you've heard me talk about KAATSU before. I really think Dr. Sato or the whole community there should get the Nobel Prize for Physiology for introducing this innovation to exercise, because it just opens it up to everyone. And we're going to go into great detail on just how it does it in a moment. But I wanted to first clear up a confusion about this. See, KAATSU, KAATSU, is a Japanese word for it means additional pressure. But it's a subset of blood flow restriction therapy. It's a type of blood flow restriction therapy. And the innovation that Katsu brings is that it cycles. In other words, it's a band that looks like a blood pressure cuff, except it looks like it, but it isn't, because it's not as wide. So it provides less pressure, and it's not a tourniquet. Tourniquet would be highly counterproductive. And it's because it partially obstructs the blood flow. When you're exercising, it generates this massive improvement in myokines, which are the muscle versions of cytokines, and it provides so many beneficial hormonal responses. So what I would like Steven to go into, and because we had a discussion a few weeks ago, and he confirmed my thoughts on this, and it's really deeply saddens me that the exercise community does not fully appreciate this yet. And I'm hoping by continued discussions like this will help them understand it. But the price of Katsu, when it was first introduced in the United States by Steven, was pretty high. Steven, it was about over $20,000, wasn't it?
Yes, we had a big, huge 16-pound analog device, and very few people could afford that.
Yeah. So, but the I guess the specialty within health that really focuses on exercise and has become acknowledged as sort of the experts in the field would be physical therapists. Just that's what the state of the science is at this point. So they were excited about this, but they couldn't afford to spend that much money. So they created their own device, which wasn't Katsu. It was a constant pressure that didn't cycle off and on. And as a result, they started like almost it's a different device that does that. And so there's this massive confusion within the physical therapy community that they think that that's identical to cycling Katsu, and it is not. It is that it's two different animals. And for the most part, you can achieve many of the bands that the physical therapy type physical blood flow restriction devices do by just a simple $15 band. You don't need a fancy device to calibrate the pressure precisely. The benefit of Katsu is it cycles up and relaxes in 30 seconds, cycles up, relaxes. And it may do that 40, 50, 100 times, depending on how you're using it. We're going to go into details in a bit. So one of the other reasons I'm so excited about Katsu and exercise in general, that has so many profound benefits. And as we're getting older, and I know many of you who are viewing this tend to be in the 50s, 60s, 70s, or even older, that is a time where you're running the risk of developing a really nasty problem that both of my parents died from. It's called sarcopenia, and sarco is two Greek words. Sarco means muscle, and penia means loss of, or eating, I think. No, it's loss of. Sorry, it's autophagy. Sorry. So lean, not that much muscle. And this is a progressive decline in muscle mass as you age, primarily due to the decrease in blood flow supply to the stem cells, or they're called satellite cells in the case of muscle, to the type 2 muscle fibers. And when that doesn't get the nourishment it requires from the body, it becomes very, very difficult to increase muscle mass. So you've got that going against you, even if you're doing regular, full-blown, hardcore resistance training. Even with that, you're still not going to get the benefits because of this lack of blood flow to there. So that's what Katsu solves. And I don't know that he did it intentionally, but it seemed it's the miracle about it. It actually increases the blood flow supply to these satellite stem cells, which is what you need. So why do we want to do that? Not only to increase the muscle mass, because there's so much disability that results from not having enough muscle masses. And it's not just aesthetics at all. It's metabolic health, because your muscle is one of the most important organs in your body to control glucose and keep you metabolically healthy. But there's so many other reasons too. We just published an article recently about how exercise itself, just by itself, not necessarily Katsu, but exercise is more effective than the best-selling antidepressant drugs for depression. It works far more effectively, and it hits just about, makes every part of your life better. So we all need it. The reason why I'm so enthralled with Katsu is that it allows those of us who are older to participate in relatively aggressive exercise with almost no risk of injury. Because if you're new to this, you'll probably be starting just with body weight. Because even if you were using resistances like dumbbells, a lot of people make this mistake. So if you're using dumbbells now, if you're not focusing on the mind-muscle connection, like just this bicep curl when you're coming up, I mean, you can go through the motion, but you've got to contract that bicep. And it's the contraction, your mind telling it to contract, and the weight that makes a difference. So you can do this with zero weight, just your arm. So you can come up, and I could put that Katsu, and I can get massive benefits with zero weight. We'll talk about different ways you can do that. So why don't you comment on that, the importance of exercise, but the benefits you're seeing, the type of in a large population, because you regularly help people ramp on board and how to learn how to use this, and you're getting lots of feedback, and you're in the trenches with the community.
Yes, and I love how you explain about sarcopenia, a word that's not commonly known, but is everywhere around us. Go to Costco, go to the park, wherever you see older people, you see that. Now, well, the advantage of Dr. Sato and the cardiologists in Japan is Japan is the most rapidly aging, the oldest society in the world, in world history. And they identified in the 1990s that sarcopenia, the loss of balance, simply falling, was going to actually lead to economic disaster because the cost of their very, very large older population, older meaning older than 65, their population pyramid had reversed. And they said, what can we do now in the 1990s to help our population not have the downfalls of sarcopenia? How can we help a 65-year-old man walk down the street, if he stumbles on something, have the leg strength to catch himself? Now, they knew that they couldn't take the average 65-year-old man and say, go to Gold's Gym, go start lifting weights. That was a non-starter. So what they were considered was, well, how do we help these people at their home, doing everyday activities, walking your dog, cleaning your countertop, practicing golf swings, just stretching. And Katsu was the answer. And the other part of this puzzle was, as you know, Dr. Mercola, if you use Katsu, like you said, and you really have that mind-body focus, you can really get after it. But the average non-athlete, the average person, isn't going to get after it because that rate of perceived exertion was too high. If you're an athlete or former athlete, you can get after it. You can feel the pump. That's not a problem. If you've had a lifetime of sedentary lifestyle for many decades, you just can't get after it right away. You're not motivationally interested in that. However, with the KAATSU cycle, it's basically this very, very clever biohack that will allow the muscles to work, will allow the vascular tissue to become more elastic as the person. They don't perceive the pain of heavy lifting. However, their vascular tissue and their muscle fibers are being worked out just as effectively, and they can do it for a longer period of time. Going out, putting the KAATSU bands on your legs and walking down to the beach, or walking your dog, or just walking around the neighborhood, standing, cleaning your windows of your house, folding your clothes, banging out emails. All of these things can be done with the KAATSU cycle, with the KAATSU bands on your arms or legs. You're getting the benefit of exercise. All of those beta endorphins are being produced. All of those hormones and metabolites that you speak so eloquently about, those are being produced as you're doing simple things. And that is the way to get the older population in Japan, in the United States, around the world, to actually understand you can stop sarcopenia. You can stop it in its place, but you have to exercise. You don't have to run a 10K. You don't have to go down to Gold's Gym. Put on the KAATSU bands and live your life as you wish it to be. And the bands will be the mechanism that your body is working out. You touched upon the cycle. So pressure on, pressure off. And in our standard device, it's 30 seconds of compression, pressure, and then 5 seconds of release, 30 seconds on, 5 seconds release. A very, very important part of that protocol, that procedure, is that each time you have the 30 seconds of compression, there is slightly more, incrementally more pressure. It's not enough that you and I can psychologically feel that, but it's enough that our capillaries and our vascular tissue and our veins feel it. They are impacted by just a very, very slight improvement. And that fine tuning of what was the optimal time, what was the optimal increase in pressure, that took 30 plus years of Dr. Sato's relentless.
A lot of time.
Yes. And you know, you can imagine, I've been to his laboratory so many times where he has notebooks and notebooks, just handwritten, of just experiment over week after week, month after month, year after year. And finally he fine-tuned it. The second difference between BFR, standard BFR as we know it in the physical therapy world, and KAATSU is actually the shape of the air bladder inside the band. So, you know, this is your standard blood pressure cuff. You know, everybody's taking their blood pressure. With KAATSU, there is a narrow air bladder. And when it inflates in an oval shape. That oval shape means that the pressure on the arterial flow is minimal, but the pressure on the venous flow, so from your lens back to your torso, is much more. And that is the secret that Dr. Sato found. He wanted to engorge the vascular tissue of your limbs in blood. That was the catalyst for all of these biochemical changes that you and I know of so well.
Yeah, and that's why you really don't want to use the inexpensive BFR bands, typically under $100, but you can find them as low as $15 just for the arms, which most people want to be using, because it's a different thing. There's a risk there. You're going to get a tourniquet, which is really, really hard to do with this. But why don't you? Thank you for explaining the cuffs. But why don't we go into the differences between what physical therapists understanding of blood flow restriction therapy is versus what KAATSU is, because it's two different worlds.
Yeah, you know, the current state of the physical therapy market is more muscle growth, muscle hypertrophy is the goal of BFR. In fact, Dr. Sato and his team of cardiologists in Tokyo, they were focused also on muscle, but they were literally focused on the vascular tissue. When you talk to Dr. Sato, when you talk to the cardiologists, the KAATSU cardiologists in Japan, our vascular tissue is the muscle that they are focused on. The actual patent, the key patent of Dr. Sato is the strengthening of the vascular tissue. That was the focus. Now they knew that if they made that our vascular tissue more elastic, basically anti-aging, enabling our vascular tissue to be as elastic as it was when we were in our teens and our 20s, they realized that was a catalyst for a variety of hormonal production, everything from nitric oxide, VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, etc. So their focus was engorging the limb in blood to the point where your hands or your feet, if you're using your leg bands, get a pink, rosy. And in some cases, you know, if you've been doing it long enough, I mean, a dark, dark red. We want the vascular tissue of our arms and legs to be very, very much engorged in blood. Therefore, simple movement, and simple movement doesn't even mean to use dumbbells. I mean, you could just as you know, Dr. McCall, you go up and down slowly with your biceps, with your limbs properly and slowly, and that's very key, slowly. You want to ramp up very slowly. Engorged in blood, you feel that lactate, you feel that metabolic waste build up very, very efficiently. And so that's a real focus. We focus on the vascular tissue and the resultant hormonal response, as opposed to a simple, well, not simple, it's still profound, but a focus on the muscular strength.
Okay, so thanks for bringing that into it. Yeah, I've been listening to a few of the podcast, or I guess you want to call them podcasts, but the training sessions that you have with new users who buy the KAATSU, because that's a really, I was previously unaware of the benefits. So if a person buys one of these things, where they've got the 4 bands and the compressor, how do they get it to work? Well, you've got this educational service that you offer once or twice a week, and people come on and ask any questions, and you walk them through the whole process. So I listened to a few of those, and was really surprised that most people, they're not using them with heavy weights at all. Well, first of all, you don't use them with heavy weights, but they're not using them with weights at all. They're just using them with the activities of daily living, ADL. So washing dishes, typing on your computer, walking the dog, as you mentioned. So that is sufficient to start. Yeah. And what has your experience been with people who start that way? How is it, like most people? Is it 75, 80, 90%? And then what is that percentage? And then how long, if they're doing it before they're feeling so much better and great and powerful that they're at least interested in exploring some mild or mild resistance training?
Oh, it's profoundly exciting. So you have, I'll put 2 buckets in general. Mm-hmm. The non-athletes who start KAATSU doing average everyday things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Once they see their increased strength, once they start looking in the mirror and seeing some definition in their arms, their core, their legs, they actually get motivationally excited to do more. Mm-hmm. You know, I've had women come up to me and said, Steve, I haven't worn a tank top since 1984. Yeah. I haven't been comfortable to show my shoulders. I haven't been comfortable to wear a pair of short pants. Mm-hmm. Once you're comfortable in your own body, as you increase in this journey to stop sarcopenia and reverse it and start again, as he says, they don't start off with the goal of becoming aesthetically more aesthetically beneficial, but they see it with their own eyes, and then they go, oh, well, can I use it on a stationary bicycle? Yes. Well, can I bought a pair of 2-pound dumbbells. Is that okay to use? It's really great to see this migration from a non-athlete sedentary lifestyle to a much, much more active. And that drive is coming from inside themselves. So that's the non-athlete population. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the athletic population, that former college athlete, that former high school quarterback. He or she might be a runner, a rower, a basketball player. Now they're older and they know how to push themselves. They typically get KAATSU, and they typically are the exact opposite. And they start lifting with heavy weights, or they start really going after it. And they say, God, I can't do much more than 10 minutes. I go, wait, stop. Don't be so aggressive. Be gentle, slow down. I'd rather you use the KAATSU cycle for 45 minutes than simply get after KAATSU for 10 minutes. And they go, oh, you mean I could still get the benefits of exercise, KAATSU, muscle building, stamina increase if I slow down, if I don't use heavy weights, if I'm not as intense? And I go, yes. So these former athletes start coming down the intensity scale. So it's very interesting seeing the non-athletes sort of go up the intensity scale. It's very interesting to see the former athletes or athletes come down the intensity scale, and they all sort of meet in this happy medium in the middle.
Oh, that's great. Great story. So as a testimony to that, I have a tendency towards being and pushing it too hard. But I listened to the advice and never went really much more than 30% of one rep max, maybe 40% occasionally, depending on how you're feeling. But it's all about listening to your body and using that feedback. But what I've noticed is I was doing them, both of them, conventional strength training twice a week and then KAATSU 5 other days of the week. Although I would walk pretty much every day with KAATSU, which I don't really count as strength training. But nevertheless, when I did the conventional strength training, I had to take a rest day, maybe 1 or 2 days a week. I absolutely had to take a rest day. But I've stopped that. Now I don't do conventional strength training at all. Zero. I mean, I just, I do not go heavy. I only go 30% of one rep max, which is pretty, it allows you to do it longer. So the workout's like 45 minutes. And what I noticed based on my Oura Ring, that which gives you a pretty good parameters of your recovery rate. Probably the best one is your resting heart rate, not only what the number is, but when it occurs during the night of time of sleeping. Is it early on or is it late? If you have a really high, the lowest heart rate is right before you wake up, it means you probably worked out too hard and you need to take a rest day. But when I do it this way, I literally do not have to take a rest day. No rest days with this, which is phenomenal. So interestingly, even though the volume of work is lower, it's actually more because you don't have to take a day off.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is crazy. Yeah.
Yes. So we call, time under tension.
Mm-hmm.
How much total time let's say in a week period, in 7 days, do you have the bands inflated on your arms? And to do that, a long-term sustained time under tension, you absolutely have to use the KAATSU cycle, and you absolutely have to do it with non-intense, non-all-out vigorous movement. Walking in your case is great. Some people do Pilates, some people do yoga, some people actually just sit and watch Netflix. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of people who are older. They're in retail, or they are in law enforcement. Let's say they're on their feet all day long. They come back home and they just want to be off their feet. They sit back on the couch, put the KAATSU bands on their legs, have a great recovery session.
Yeah, so it's good. Let's go into that too, because anyone who's done exercise is familiar with the components. One is the warm up, 2 is the exercise itself, and then 3 is the cool down.
Yeah.
So KAATSU is actually useful in all of those phases. I believe your statements are that it is the best warm up you can have.
Yes.
At least for that limb. Now, if you just have the bands on your arms, it's not going to really warm up your legs too much. But if you want to be band specific to the exercise you're going to be doing, and a caution too is you never really use the bands simultaneously. It's either arm bands once or the leg bands, but don't do both.
Yeah,
because it would lower your blood pressure too much and could be a problem. It's not going to cause a stroke or heart attack, because the pressure in these cuffs is so low that it doesn't cause a clot, unlike a tourniquet band could.
Yes. So quite often, especially for our elite athletes, our competitive athletes, let's say our NCAA student athletes, our professional athletes, our Olympic athletes, they're using KAATSU in the form in their training. So they might have an 1.5 or 2 hour training session. They're not using it throughout that 1 hour or 2 hour session, but they're using it within that training session. But most importantly, they are using it before they get to the gym, before they get to the track, before they get to the pool. So when they do start their warm-up, their traditional warm-up, their vascular tissue is already ready to go. And so if we talk to our track athletes, they feel I feel light on my feet. If we're talking to a basketball player, volleyball player, God, I'm already jumping it near my vertical leap max. So they're using it before, they're using it during, and very, very importantly, afterwards. They could be, after they've taken a shower. They could be hydrating. They could be, talking with their friends. Whatever body part they really focused on that workout, if it was a lower body workout or upper body workout, they're throwing the bands on, 30 seconds pressure on, 5 seconds pressure off. During that 5 seconds pressure, that metabolic waste is being whooshed out. And therefore, they are ready for their maybe the next workout or the next day. And that's why, Dr. Mercola, if you're using KAATSU 7 days a week, there really is no need for a rest day.
Mm-hmm.
You can hit it and again, think less intensity, less vigorousness, and more a gradual ramp up of pressure. I'm quite sure, Dr. Mercola, when we look at your hands, they're probably a beefy red, and your veins are distended, and that's just a visual confirmation that you're really engorging the limbs in blood, and then that kickstarter to all of these this hormonal response.
Yeah, which is really profound. And as I said, the other component is that metabolic. It doesn't just address sarcopenia and make you aesthetically more attractive, but it metabolically improves your resiliency so that you can really seamlessly transition between burning fat and glucose as your primary fuel. And most people, like 95% of the people in the country, are metabolically inflexible, which means they've lost that. So KAATSU will help build your muscle mass, and by doing so, it increases the number of glucose transporters in the cell membranes, which suck that sugar in after you eat a meal, and it lowers your blood sugar so the insulin doesn't go up and you don't develop insulin resistance, which is really a profoundly effective component.
You mentioned the mind-body and really focusing on a bicep, and that was
body-mind, or the mind-muscle connection. The mind-muscle, as opposed to body, just it's the muscle, because that's what you're working out. You're focusing on a muscle. So you want to talk about that?
Yes, yeah. So it was, Dr. McCall, you had mentioned the mind-muscle connection, and the only other physician who had ever mentioned that to me was Dr. Sato.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you why. You know why? Because he's a bodybuilder, and almost any bodybuilder, that is one of the core principles. It's the mind-muscle connection. You've got to focus on that muscle, because if you're not, it's not going to work. Unconsciously moving the joint through a range of motion with the weight is not going to do it. It just isn't. I mean, you get some of it, but it's dramatically inferior to activating and contracting that muscle group.
Yeah. So when he first said that to me, he said, let me demonstrate it to you. So he put the bands on my arms, and we did some simple bicep curls. And I was actually doing it. This was early on in first meeting Dr. Sato in 2001. So I was going pretty quickly, and he goes, slow down. What's the hurry? I slowed down, and I started to feel that lactate buildup. And he says, okay, Steve, move your arms much more slowly and contract the muscle up and down. And I was like, whoa, that's different. Then he goes, okay, stop. He took the band off. He goes, now I only want you to do it on the right arm. I did the same thing very slowly, contracting the muscle up, both upwards and downwards. When I got to the top, he asked me to make a fist and go back down. And then he said, okay, now I want you to focus on that right bicep. Really just put your mind where that bicep is. Oh my gosh, that was the ultimate. So I went from doing, sort of a mindless, very quick KAATSU bicep, because I did have the bands on, to a very, very focused
night and day
mind muscle. And it was night and day. And then so he took that and he said, Steve, so now let's say you're working with a stroke patient, and let's say they that one of their side is affected, or someone simply with a total knee replacement, or something where it's impacting one side of the body. Said, Steve, In that same way you had that mind muscle focused, we want to do the same thing for those people who are disabled or who are injured. And so instead of putting both bands on their arms, let's say, and focusing on sort of a mindless movement, let's take that stroke survivor and put a band on, put a pencil in his hand, put a fork in his hand, do something, and have them just do some movement. Put a toothbrush in his hand, put a comb in his hand, something which makes them focus on that movement. And boy, when I saw the effect of really that mind muscle focus on able-bodied people and then people who were injured or disabled, it really opened my eyes to a lot that KAATSU can do for people.
Yeah, and it can. So when people transition from just doing body weight exercises, which you can go for quite a while, and you really, depending on how fit you are or muscular you are, maybe that's all you need. You don't need anything more. I mean, it depends on how much you want to push, but if you do want to push it, you can use weights. So the problem with weights, and here, one of the benefits of KAATSU, as I maybe alluded to earlier, is that because the weights are so low, you almost never get injured. Now, yes, you should do the proper form. So ideally, you have a trainer review your form, because if you have incorrect posture, even without any weights, that could be an issue, especially if you're doing a squat or something, you hurt your knee. But if you have the right form and a low weight, you're just going to avoid all injuries. And that's what takes us so many people out of exercise, is the injuries. So you can eliminate that. But if you are at that inactive, sedentary person and you've just done the body weights, you want to progress, what I've learned, for me, my favorite type of resistance training is as cables. And a cable machine typically can go up to $10,000, a good one. You can get them for less. I mean, you can get some under $1,000, but it's not as good. So, but anyway, you're very rarely going to find one under $1,000. Even if you do, you're going to have to put your own weights on. So that's out of the price point for most people. So what could they do that's as good as a cable machine? Well, it's another type of band. It's called a resistance band. And there's two types of resistance band. One is the tubes that almost everyone thinks of when you hear the word resistant band. Those aren't you can get good workouts on, but they're made so cheaply that invariably they only wind up lasting a few months. And then they break and they snap and they can hurt you and stuff. So you got to be careful of those. But there's another type of resistance bands. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Steve, but it's 41 inches and it's called a loop resistance band. It's one giant loop, like a giant rubber band, essentially. Uh-huh. But and they come in varying degrees of, anything from a 5-pound resistance to a 200 or 300 pound resistance that you'd be doing deadlifts with. But the beautiful thing about KAATSU is maybe you need 2 or 3 of the smallest bands. That's all you need. It's like a giant rubber band, and you can do virtually every type of exercise you can on the cable machine. So I'm actually in the process right now of going through it, because it's not quite as elegant as the tube bands that have handles. So, but you can create things with carabiners. So I'm working on a system and getting door anchors and essentially making literally a sub $100 investment in loop bands to equal almost the similar benefit of a $10,000 cable machine. So that's my project for the next few months. But just to know that those types of things are resistant. If you already have the regular tube bands, you can use those. They are really fantastic. Just got to be careful. As they get older, they will break and snap. And you don't want to get hit in the head with those or the body, because it can hurt quite a bit.
Again, it's pretty amazing. We got to get you and Dr. Sato together, because he loves cables. He loves these cable workouts.
And the reason why he loves them and I love them is, unlike a dumbbell, when you go through a range of motion, when you get that dumbbell in a bicep curl, there's almost zero resistance when you're up this way. Not so with a cable machine or the bands. And in fact, with the resistance bands, the more you get up and the further away from the band, the more resistance you have. It's the highest up here, whereas with dumbbell, lowest, and that's when you need it the most, when you're maximally contracted. So a resistance band is exponentially superior to like a dumbbell.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to when it comes to biceps.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah. So
I remember early in my training, and Dr. Sato literally trained me for 13 years. It was very much like the movie Karate Kid, or if you want to be a sushi chef, you gotta wash the rice for many, many years before you start cutting the fish. And we traveled together, and then he'd go, what do you see when you walk into a hotel room? And I said, well, a bed, a desk, a TV. And he goes, no. He goes, that is a workout room. He goes, those water bottles, you could use those for resistance. That chair, that desk, you could use it for incline push-ups. And it was pretty amazing. We walked through an airport, let's say, and he would just quiz me, and he would say, that person over there is walking with a limp. How would you use Katsu on that individual? What are the things that you would go? What are the things you would say? And it was very it was like sitting with a modern day Socrates who would just ask the question until I got the answer nearly right.
No, that's great. Yeah. So that with respect to the hotel room, and we were talking about the bands. Well, you got to be careful. Like sometimes I just made this mistake recently because I'm still in traveling from like last week. I put the bands or the loop band on a coat rack or something, and I thought it was secured into the studs, and it was just simple drywall anchors. And I pushed it. I was doing face pulls, and boom, the whole thing came out of the wall.
Oh no!
I went back down on the tile floor, and I fractured my finger actually. So you can't with Katsu. I was, but the key thing, and I'm changing this, so I come up with this whole system, and relating to that hotel room. The other thing the other aspect of that room that's really vital is a door. Who would have thought a door could be so great? Well, the door, there are things called door anchors. They cost a whopping $6 that you could put in the door, close the door. It's secure. Usually you put it on the side of the door where it's closing in, so it's hitting against the jamb. Otherwise, you don't want to come through that. And so you might have gone to the outside of the door in a hotel room. I don't know. I don't know how that works. But anyway, it creates this anchor, and you can put the anchor low, medium, or at the top, and then you can use the bands, and you can work out like crazy. You don't have to worry about finding like a tree trunk or something, because in a hotel room it's kind of hard to find an anchor. I mean, I'm in a hotel room now, and I just don't see any anchors out here unless you go to a railing or a stair railing or something, or a banister. But so that's these door anchors. I never even knew they existed until last week. But you combine that with handles on these loop bands, and literally, it's just like a giant rubber band, that's like, you can do so many things with them. I'm so excited about this. It's my new project now, because I think it brings resistance training to the masses, and they don't have to pay. Literally, I mean, the lowest, I've gotten it for friends before, the lowest that you can do. Thankfully, with Katsu, you don't need weights more than 20 pounds typically, unless you're really athletic. So you can get sets of dumbbells below that and a bench for maybe between $300 and $400. That's still $300 and $400. I think you can get the bands for with everything between $100 and $200 easily, and you've got everything you need. Probably even closer to $100.
Yeah.
So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I think that the excitement that I obviously hear in your voice, et cetera, is the excitement that we get with a lot of the new Katsu users. They start to explore different things that they can do, and then the different things that their body can do over time. And when they're excited about themselves, I see them blossom. Their self-confidence starts to increase. They're smiling. Dr. Sato calls it the Katsu smile. So that you need to have people smiling when they're doing Katsu. Smiling because they're satisfied, smiling because they're happy, smiling because they feel their body moving, and they feel their body having greater range of motion, greater strength. And so that's what we try to do in these twice weekly sessions for new users or people who are just interested is we have a Zoom call, and people can fire away any amount of questions that they would like, and we stay on and try to answer as many questions as we can, as simply as we can, so they can understand how they can really make a paradigm shift in their lifestyle and their health.
Yeah, so I'm really excited because it's, to me, the ideal form of exercise for the elderly and the long-time sedentary and inactive adults who need it the most desperately and will die prematurely if they don't get some type of exercise intervention. So to me, this is just so massively important. And you just, I want to repeat it again, but it's important because it's so fundamental, is that you're not going to get the same result by strapping on like a tourniquet band that you would draw your blood with. Yes, you can do constant KAATSU, but that's a different deal. It's not the cycling. You're not going to get, because even with constant, even though you get benefits, it's when you release the pressure, that cycle that activates the myokines.
Yes.
It's often on. And if you do that twice a minute for 45 minutes, you're getting a lot of activations. So you get a lot of hormonal benefits as opposed to just wrapping it tight. Like, because I made that mistake for the first time. I thought I started using it for 2 or 3 years. I was mostly doing the constant tension, which you could do with an inexpensive band. But then I realized, oh my gosh, my muscles were getting bigger, but they were getting spastic. They weren't as healthy, and it's just so much better. So now I never do the constant tension. I just don't. Always 100% cycle. And I was opposed to that when I first started. I said, no, the constant is going to be better. But no, but it is. The cycle is the way to go, 100%.
Yeah. Katsu is very non-intuitive.
Yeah.
You use less weight, less resistance for more muscle. You do less intensity for better results. It just, on the face of it, what we know on what I'll call it on the macro level just doesn't make sense. But if you look at it at a nano level, a micro level, what is actually happening within the body as you engorge the limbs and blood, KAATSU makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would agree with less intensity. I mean, it's definitely overall the conventional training, but you have to put some intensity into it. So that doesn't mean you have to put a lot of weight. I mean, you can do a body, what we were talking about earlier, where you're getting that muscle-mind connection. That's a pretty intense contraction. I could feel my biceps contracting now, and it's intense. You want to get that. You really want to contract the muscle fibers. If you're just going through the motions and thinking that the KAATSU bands are magic, they're really good, but they're not magic. They need your cooperation actively as an active participant. And you don't have to use a lot of resistance, but you have to be involved and engaged and thinking through this process of what you're doing. It's just not just going through the motions or just putting them on and typing and walking. Walking is good, but it's still, you need to be involved. And now, obviously, when you're walking, you're not going to be actively thinking, well, I'm contracting my hamstrings and my calves. No, because you're doing thousands and thousands of reps. But when it's a specific motion like this, you have to be a little more, I think you got to be more conscious.
Yeah. What I meant by less intensive is any one moment in time. So with the KAATSU cycle, you can increase that duration. And therefore, if the duration increases and the time under tension is, let's say, the area under the graph, that area is much greater. So the total, I'll call it hard stuff, is much longer, much greater. That's what I meant.
So it's really good for the elderly, as I mentioned, and the sedentary and inactive population, but it's also good for athletes. So as a testimony of this, and not suggesting that everyone should go out and try to be a professional athlete, obviously very few people are capable of doing that type of endeavor, but to me, that's a testimony to how effective this is as a tool to improve overall metabolic and biological health. So maybe you can share with us some of the athletes that are using this, professional athletes, college athletes, and getting results with it, and that's why they use it, and professional teams too.
Yes, I mean, you can go all the way from the teams in Boston to the teams in Los Angeles. Clayton Kershaw as a pitcher, Caleb Dressel is a 7-time Olympic gold medalist. You can have things as varied as the German bobsledder teams. That bobsledding, you've got these large men that are pushing a very heavy sled, and they're very intense for about 7 seconds, and then they're tucked inside. To Olympic divers, Laura Wilkinson. If you think about a platform diver, they're a very fast twitch athlete. They're in the air for about a second or a second and a half. That is their event. And so whether you are focusing on a fast twitch activity like Clayton Kershaw throwing a baseball, or Laura Wilkinson jumping off a Olympic platform diver, or something like the cycling teams that we have, the ice hockey teams that we have in the NHL. I mean, these are all different ways, and they all use slightly different protocols. They're using the KAATSU cycle, but in different formats. So, for example, if we're working with the Olympic track athletes and the 100 and 200 meters, they could be using their bands and then working on their starts, or that first hurdle on the hurdles. They typically will do KAATSU, cycle to warm up. If they're doing a very specific motion, like, in the starting blocks, use it in the constant mode there, and then releasing the bands. And this is very important for athletes or someone who's going to make a speech. We found that the human growth hormone and most of the hormones that are released are released about 12 to 15 minutes after you take off the bands. So the maximal production of hormones isn't when you actually have the bands on. There's a time delay. So what does that mean? Now, when we share that information with a professional athlete, let's say an NBA player who's in the NBA dunk contest, well, they're doing KAATSU ideally 15 minutes before they get on the court to do their dunk. They want to maximize their physicality when their hormones, their adrenaline, their beta endorphins, et cetera, are flowing. You want to perform at that point in time. So we basically backdate. We go back and say, okay, if let's say at 12 noon, that your race is going to start, then let's finish the KAATSU session at 11:45. That gives you enough time to put on your jersey, get ready, et cetera. So same thing in between periods, in between halves. We have everybody from high schoolers to college athletes to pros that are using the bands. And this actually came from the Japanese pitchers who are using the bands in between innings. Between innings. So, it's a 9-inning game. Let's say they pitch 6 innings. They were recovering in between the first and second and third and fourth inning. And we did a test with the equivalent of the NCAA baseball players in Japan, those young athletes who were, aiming at the pros, whether it was the Japanese leagues or Major League Baseball. And we found for those athletes who use KAATSU exclusively, their pitch count and their number of innings that they pitched increased over the whole season versus the control group that did not use KAATSU during that season. So, athletes are always looking for an edge, and we are advising the athletes, well, is recovery important? Is recovery for a pitcher in between innings important? What about that relief pitcher who is, sitting on, in the dugout or in the bullpen for the first 5 or 6 innings, and all of a sudden he's called up in the 7th inning? Okay, start using KAATSU gently in the 5th inning. You may or may not be called, but if you're called, at least you're ready. What about that athlete in the in halftime at a pretty soon March Madness will come on. you're an underdog team. You're playing against the North Carolinas, the Kentuckys of the world. Well, you want to come out in that second period like gangbusters. Do a little recovery in the halftime. There's enough time where the basketball players are sitting down, listening to the coach, in the halftime. Put the bands on your legs, get some fresh energy, fresh blood in there. So we do it in really innovative ways.
It's obvious for pitchers, or maybe but most baseball players, that bands should go on the arms, because again, you don't want to use them both simultaneously. But for endurance athletes like a basketball player, or soccer player, or even, well, I guess even football player too, it would likely go on the legs, right?
Yes. Like most likely, especially let's say in the a football season, early part of football season where it's very humid and hot, you want to avoid the effects of dehydration or overheating. Usually the legs are where the athletes prefer it. So it's a lot easier with the basketball player as opposed to a hockey player who's got a lot of equipment on. So, it depends what body part you have. But for example, I'll give you a very practical example. At the Olympics, especially for 100, 200, and 400 meter runners, you've got 3 races: the preliminary heats, the semifinal heats, and the final heats within one 36-hour period. Well, they're doing KAATSU in between the prelims and semifinals, and between the semifinals and finals, simply to get that body back to 100% as quickly as possible. So we have arm wrestlers. Arm wrestlers typically, I mean, we're talking professional level arm wrestlers. In a tournament, you might have as many as 5, 6, 7 matches within a very short period of time. Very intense, very intense. As soon as they're finished, we want that metabolic waste whooshed out. So they throw on the KAATSU bands on both arms and do some KAATSU cycles.
I was interested. I was going to ask about arm wrestlers, because that would seem to me be a perfect application for it.
Yeah.
Really intense concentrations of those muscles in the arms.
Yeah.
So, well, this is great. Any other information you'd like to share with us?
No, I mean, we've got KAATSU literally being used underwater with aquanauts.
How do they do that? Because the device isn't waterproof.
No, we're talking aquanauts in the Jules Verne. I mean, literally underwater structures.
Okay.
That are mimicking what would happen if we sent a spaceship to Mars. We've used them in submarines. If you're a submariner, you're pretty confined for months on end. So, you're living in a small space. Obviously, there's some stress involved. Just doing some simple bicep curls, some hand clenches, some tricep extensions, some squats by your bunk. I mean, these are all great, really innovative ways we use KAATSU. Everything from long distance haulers, truck drivers who, they're sitting and they're going, let's say, from Ohio to Florida, or from Oklahoma to California. This is an ideal way in confined space that you can get a workout if you don't have the luxury of going down to the gym, or even working out, just walking around your neighborhood. You might be quite busy as you are on a business trip, and maybe you're at your convention and you've been on your feet all day. By the time you get back to your hotel room and dinner, and you're just exhausted. Throw it on, get there. So we're in 49 countries around the world. Through your help, Dr. Mercola, we've been able to reach a lot of people. It's really, really a heartfelt labor of love that we're doing. We hear so many stories that are really touching, and that drives us every single day. So, if people are interested, they're very welcome to attend our Tuesday and Thursday 1-hour sessions at 12 noon.
That's great. Yeah, because it's a fantastic resource. When I was promoting this device for many years, but I wasn't even aware that resource existed for new people, and it's a great benefit that you get so that you don't feel abandoned. You've got these, because many people
community.
what do I do now? I'm also, as I said, are in the process of really compiling the next sort of advanced level of, once people are past the sedentary and active mode, to use these relatively inexpensive loop bands and sets with handles and things that you can attach to door anchors, and the whole setup. This hopefully will have available later this year. But which you could use without the KAATSU, certainly. So it depends, whatever you want. But I think ideally you would merge both of them.
Yes.
And you get the best of both worlds, which is fantastic. Because I like KAATSU, but I think I've got 3 units, because I just don't ever want to be without this device, because I use it every day.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Mercola. It's
all right. Well, thank you for your pioneering work, your commitment, your dedication, for doing the hard work of going over there and bringing this to the United States. We would not have this if it wasn't for you. So, as a representative for the community, I'm just extending my gratitude and appreciation for all the work that you did.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. Remember, hit the like and subscribe button so you can get more videos that can help you and your family take control of your health.